An insect that affects terminal growth that needs special attention, I think, is the white pine weevil. So the white pine weevil is a type of weevil, a snout beetle, and in the east it develops in white pines, and here we're going to see it mostly in blue spruce. It's going to affect just the top of the plant, the leader of the plant. So here it's regionally restricted to blue spruce, and you're not going to see effects over the whole plant, over all the tips of the branches as you would with the pine tip moth. It's just the top of the plant. Were you to go to the east, you're going to see it being associated with white pines, as the name may better indicate. A very common insect on eastern white pine if you go to areas where that is a native plant. It's rare to see an eastern white pine that has a single stem trunk, because at some point in its growth it's almost always been affected by this insect, as in many places spruce is affected by white pine weevil. The adult is going to be active in early spring, early to mid-spring. In the higher elevations it'll be maybe April to May. It can be earlier than that in lower elevations, but this is an insect that is mostly common at higher elevations, mostly common in areas around ski resorts, for instance, rather than, say, down in Denver or along the Front Range or Grand Junction. Anyway, the adults resume activity in spring, emerging from areas where they have spent the winter under some leaves in the near vicinity of a spruce tree or some needles or some other protected site. They'll move and they'll start to feed on the plant. They'll chew little pits and feed on some sap, and they'll chew more pits and feed on some sap, and they'll mate. And we see a mating pair on the right here. And then ultimately the female will get around to start laying eggs. She'll chew little pits in the terminal growth and insert eggs. And this is all happening about the time the buds are starting to break, just when the new shoots are just about to become formed. And she's feeding at the base of where this new growth is starting to emerge from. You may see some gumming developing at these wounds, but again, this is all happening at the top of the plant, so very difficult to observe. The larvae are going to hatch from these eggs that are laid underneath the bark, and many larvae are typically laid so that you will have enough that will then produce so much damage that essentially all the inner tissue of the developing terminal will be girdled, and as a result it can't sustain itself. It can't move nutrients, it can't move water, and you will see it collapse. As a result, we get a symptom that is sometimes called a shepherd's crook, where it kind of curls over, and this is all happening before the new growth has fully expanded and hardened. So it curls, it's still soft, but it's a result of the fact that there have been larvae that have developed and girdled and removed the tissues from areas underneath where you see this symptom. When they're done, they will then kind of dig in a little bit into the more woody part of the terminal that's still left and construct a little cocoon called a chip cocoon within which they'll pupate. And these are indicated in a couple of pictures here that I'm showing you. These chip cocoons are very distinctive, and were you to see a chip cocoon even years after the insect has left, it would allow you to easily diagnose that the cause had been white pine weevil. These chip cocoons are very diagnostic. So, chip cocoons on the left, the bark has been removed. If everything goes well, the adult will emerge from those cocoons and then exit through a small little hole. Again, all of this is happening at the terminal, at the top of the plant. After they've fed a bit on the needles and on the twigs in the summer, they will then move to some place to get through the winter and resume activity the following spring. One generation a year. So the damage we see from white pine weevil is a death of the terminal growth, the top growth, and as a result, the plant has to reestablish a new leader. And sometimes it does this by producing multiple leaders, two or sometimes more, which causes the form of the spruce tree, or in the east, the pine tree, to have a different form, not a single trunk, but instead a multi-stem trunk a fork, becoming more bush-like. And if this happens repeatedly, it becomes increasingly forked. Now there is a fact sheet on this. You can check this out that has the recommendations on white pine weevil. The management strategies for this are controlling the adults with insecticides prior to the time they are laying eggs in spring. Now, this is a fairly difficult thing to do because the insects are at the top of the tree. But the only place where treatments need to be applied is at that terminal growth. It should be done quite early in the year before the new shoots come out. The timing is a little difficult to determine, but a persistent insecticide applied before the new shoots come out, a little bit before the new shoots are emerging, is probably going to be able to control adults well throughout the season. So you're targeting these adults as they move back to the terminals. They are exposed, and you can get them at that time. So in the east, where there are some indicators that are associated with this insect that have been developed, again, it's earlier. It's quite early. The first applications around the bloom of forsythia, which unfortunately is not a plant that reliably grows and blooms around here, and then reapplying about 2 weeks later. Targeting the leader, and a lot of persistent pyrethroids are a best choice in landscape settings. They're labeled for this kind of use. It's a bark beetle. Rate would be quite effective, and many of these can work, but again, it requires treating the top of the tree. Now, another management that has come up that seems to have good promise is using systemic insecticides. And the systemic insecticide that has been identified that can work, and there may be others, but would be imidacloprid, Merit, or any of the generics we have now. Now, the trick on this is that this is one of the very few times we would want to use a soil application of a systemic insecticide in fall rather than in spring. The reason for this is you have to have some period of time that allows these insecticides to move into the new growth where the white pine weevil is going to be inserting its eggs and feeding before it inserts the eggs. So if we treat this in spring, it's usually an insufficient amount of time elapses before the insect has already begun to feed and done its damage. And once they've started to girdle the leader, insecticides as well as nutrients and water can't move to that point. So this is one of the very few insects that perhaps is best managed by a fall application of a systemic insecticide. Now, if the damage has already happened, then the thing you should try to do would be to promote a new leader. So the primary leader has been destroyed. Any of the ones that are indicated here, and it looks like there's about 6 that could potentially be a new leader, and maybe 2 or 3 of them would be if you didn't do anything to intervene. So if you could somehow maybe retard the ones that you don't want to grow and allow the one that you do want to grow to grow undisturbed, that would allow promotion of a new leader. So we have 6 leaders right here. Say pinch a little bit of the tip of the 5 you don't want to be the new leader, and very soon you will see the one you have left intact becoming the dominant leader, re-exerting itself, and you might get a little crook then in the form of the tree, but not much. You won't get a forking. You won't get competing dominant leaders. So promoting a new dominant leader, if the terminal has been destroyed, is a part of managing this insect when it does occur. So again, 2 different leaders, and in this case, both the leaders are by themselves also being affected. So that may then produce even more leaders the next year. So it might take a little work to get this insect under control in the beginning, but if you keep watching it and see how it's progressing, and often these things will go away because of natural enemies and the like. They come and go. You can bring your tree around.